Everybody, welcome to my channel. So today's video is going to be on the Colonial Park murders. So the Colonial Parkway is a beautiful stretch of highway in the southeast of Virginia. It actually cuts through Colonial National Historical Park. So this stretch of highway is very quiet. It's surrounded by trees. There aren't very many exits or entrances, so it's kind of like the perfect place to murder somebody and not get caught. So in the 1980s, there were 8 murders on the Colonial Park Highway. Police believe that there was a serial killer who committed all 8 murders. The first 2 victims were Kathy Thomas and Rebecca Dowski. On October 12, 1986, a pedestrian found a car that was on the embankment of the Colonial Highway, and this car was in such a place where it was not able to be seen from the road very well. This pedestrian called a highway patrolman to come investigate the scene, and the highway patrolman discovered the bodies of Kathy Thomas and Rebecca Dowski. Kathy Thomas was a 27-year-old woman who graduated from the Naval Academy. Rebecca Ann Dowski was a 20-year-old woman who was a student at the College of William and Mary. These 2 women were missing since October 9th. They were last seen at a computer lab on campus. Both women were brutally murdered. They were strangled and bound with rope. And the killers slit their throats so deeply that they were almost decapitated. So Rebecca's body was found in the back seat of the car, while Kathy was found in the hatchback of the car. Police believe that the women were murdered somewhere else and then placed in the car because there was not a lot of blood at the crime scene. There was also no evidence of sexual assault, and robbery was able to be ruled out as a motive because the women's purses were still there, no jewelry had been taken. The police also discovered that the killer had tried to set the car on fire, but was unable to do so. And the police investigated this crime exhaustively, but they were never able to find who did it, and it eventually went cold. The next 2 victims on the Colonial Parkway were David Knobling and Robin Edward. So on September 22nd, 1987, the bodies of David Knobling and Robin Edwards were found on the James River in Virginia. David Knobling was only 20 years old, and Robin Edwards was even younger, only 14 years old. They were reported missing 3 days prior, on September 19th. Earlier in the day, on September 19th, the pair had met up at an arcade. Upon departure, they made promises to meet up later that night. So David's car was then found in a parking lot by the James River Bridge. 2 pairs of underwear, shoes, and David's wallet were found in the car, which again ruled out robbery as a motive. And the driver's side window was actually rolled down, so the police were led to believe that this could be because maybe the killer had posed as some kind of uniformed officer or policeman. Unfortunately, both of the victims had been shot. So Robin was shot in the back of her head, execution style, and David was shot twice. Once in his head and once in his shoulder, as if he had been running. So Robin's pants were also rolled down, but the police were unsure if any type of sexual assault had occurred because they believed that David and Robin had a sexual relationship. So unlike the last 2 murders I talked about, these didn't occur on the Colonial Parkway, but they were linked to the first set of murders that I talked about because these murders occurred in a lover's lane or, a secluded area with a couple. And both locations were only about a 30-minute drive apart. And unfortunately, this case also went cold as well. So less than a year after the last two murders, another couple went missing. On April 10th, 1988, Cassandra Lee Haley, who was only 18, and Richard Keith Call, who was only 20, both students of Christopher Newport University, reported to be missing after attending a party together. And a day after being reported missing, Richard's car was actually found at York River Outlook, right off the Colonial Parkway, only 2 miles from where Kathy and Rebecca had been found. Robbery was ruled out as a motive because all of Cassandra and Richard's clothing were found in the car, and also Richard's wallet was also found in the car as well. Cassandra's purse was also in the car. And in this case, the bodies were actually never found, and again, the case went cold. So the last two victims were Daniel Lawyer and Anna Marie Phelps. So a year and a half later from the last two killings, two more people again went missing around Colonial Parkway. It was Memorial Day weekend in 1989. Daniel Lawyer, only 21 at the time, was reported to be driving to his brother's house in Virginia Beach with his brother's girlfriend, Anna Maria Phelps, who was only 18 at the time. They were reported missing on September 5th when their car was discovered abandoned at the New Kent stop on I-64. So their car was actually found on the westbound side of the highway, which was the opposite direction to their destination, which was very confusing for the police. Again, police weren't sure if Anna Maria and David were killed at the rest stop or if they were killed elsewhere and the killer just moved their car. And eventually, a month later, their bodies were found. And just like the rest of the cases, robbery again was ruled out as a motive because Anna Maria's purse was found in the car. About a month later, on October 19th, their bodies were discovered by hunters on a logging road about 1 mile away from the rest stop. The bodies were covered by a blanket that was previously in David's car, and they were badly decomposed. This made it impossible to determine the cause of death and also impossible to determine if sexual assault occurred. Police were able to make out, though, a stab wound on Anna Maria's bones. They speculated that she was possibly stabbed to death, but unfortunately, just like the other three cases, this case went cold as well. The police believe that all 8 of these murders were by the same killer because of the similarities. All of them were couples, all of them were either on or very close to the Colonial Parkway. They were all at kind of secluded spots, lovers' lanes, rest stops. None of the victims were robbed. Sexual assault wasn't found to have happened in any of the cases as well. However, other people claim that this wasn't the work of a serial killer, that maybe, it was committed by 2 or more murderers, and that is because of the difference in the way that the victims were killed. Kathy and Rebecca were strangled to death, and then they had their throats slit. David and Robin were shot, and Anna Maria and Daniel were stabbed. A detective named Steve Spingola, who was put onto the case as a private investigator, believes that the murders of Kathy and Rebecca are not connected to the other murders that I mentioned. He thinks that they're actually connected to a murder that occurred in 1996 in Shenandoah National Park. So a young couple by the names of Julie Williams, who's only 24, and Lolly Winans, who was only 26, went camping over Memorial Day weekend in that park. But they never returned home, so they were reported missing. And their bodies were found June 1st. They were bound and gagged, similarly to Kathy and Rebecca, and their throats had also been split. So Detective Spingoli believes that the murderer who killed Kathy and Rebecca also killed Julie and Lolly. And he believes that it was a hate crime because these, women were in same-sex relationships. Over the years, 150 suspects were questioned over all of these murders, but all of their names had been cleared. So Kathy's brother, Bill Thomas, actually has a Facebook page on the Colonial Park murders. DNA had been found at 3 of the 4 crime scenes, which could link the cases and lead to an arrest. So hair was actually found in Kathy's hand, and there was also a biological sample in Robin. But these 2 pieces of DNA have never been tested. However, because of the advancements that we have in DNA testing today, it is the family's hope that these samples can be tested and a killer can be found and brought to justice. Anyway, guys, that is the story of the Colonial Park murders. Thank you so much for watching. See, as always, all my sources used are linked down below. And I'll see you next time. Bye!